Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. Hey, Thriving Farmers. Michael Kilpatrick here with you, another episode of the Thriving Farmer Podcast. Today, my guest is Noah East, who is a farmer, writer, and educator at Wild East Farm in Western North Carolina. Alongside his wife, Lyric, their farm is at the ground level in establishing a sustainable ecosystem that will focus on perennial production and revitalizing rural communities. Noah, welcome to the podcast.
Hey there. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So why don't you give us a little bit of an overview of kind of like how you came to wanting to be a farmer?
Yeah. So it's a long story, but the best place to start is Lyric and I met in college, and we were both studying ecology and biology. And during our last couple years there, we were fortunate enough to move into a house that was on a little homestead just outside of Asheville. And so during those years when we were still in school studying, we were coming home and learning how to grow a garden. We started out with some backyard egg-laying chickens. We started breeding rabbits for meat, and we're totally green getting started. We had no clue what we were doing, and we're just excited to have a living laboratory to learn and grow as we went. So it didn't take too long into the process of being there that it occurred to both of us that we could pursue ecology and be applied ecologists by having agriculture as our vocation and livelihood, and kind of switched gears and decided that we wanted to really set our sights and pursue starting our own farm business down the road sometime. So about 3 years in 2020, to living at that house and that homestead, I was fortunate enough to get a position managing a 8-acre organic vegetable farm. And there, me and the owner really co-ran all day-to-day operations, big picture planning. And I got a really good insight into what it took to manage and operate a commercial scale enterprise, which was something that's a big learning curve going from just homesteading into farming. So I kind of got a dry run into what it takes and the workload and all of those things before having all of our own money and emotions and everything invested into our own project. In that same time, Lyric had several jobs working for local nonprofits in food access and food distribution. She worked a lot getting to know the community here involved in that, as well as other local farmers. And so during that time, while we were homesteading and saving money and planning the farm of the future for us, we were gaining these skills and building a local community and really trying to set ourselves up to be ready to go when the opportunity presented itself.
All right. So then so that was the background. Let's talk about how you found your current farm property.
Yeah, we have a pretty unique story for our land access. When we first decided we wanted to start farming, we were pretty hard set on owning land, mostly just for the land tenure and the security that comes with owning versus what we had seen at the time of many traditional farm lease opportunities in the area. And so, as I said, we were saving money really aggressively, trying to put up a nest egg to purchase farmland sometime in the future. And with the Asheville real estate bubble growing between, really during that time while we were saving from 2019 to 2022, the real estate prices were outpacing our ability to save. So it felt like the more money that we had in the bank account, the less we could afford during that time. And that was kind of a gut check of really looking deep and assessing, do we really need to stay in Western North Carolina? To that point, we hadn't really thought about moving anywhere else. We had spent, to that point, about 7 or 8 years living here in Western North Carolina, building community, getting to know this area, falling in love with it. We really didn't want to leave, but we still wanted to own land. And so we started somewhat of a search further afoot. We were looking in the Northeast. Lyric is from Northwest Michigan. We were thinking about up there where in some areas, land prices are a bit more accessible. And through that process of looking, it did sink in that we really were in no rush to leave Western North Carolina. It felt like a really big challenge to kind of hit the reset button on going into a whole new community where we don't know anyone and
Yeah.
starting fresh in that sense where we built up so many connections and relationships. And so we kind of just put our hands down and said, we're happy at this homestead. We're happy with the lives we're living now. We trust that the right opportunity will present itself when it's meant to come. And within weeks of not pushing so hard anymore in our land search, the opportunity came up for the land that Wild East is now on. And I found that on a website called NC FarmLink. So that's a website here that's run through the state extension agency where people with land access opportunities can post what they have and share that with farmers who are seeking. And, that can be lease opportunities, lease to own, straight out purchases. There's all kind of opportunities that come up there. And after searching on there for that whole time and not quite finding the right thing come up, this land popped up on the radar. And the language in the posting was talking a lot about long-term lease, long-term security, farmer autonomy, which is a big thing for us with considering a lease and wanting to be able to start the type of farm we wanted to without, some of the agendas or whatever of that a landlord may have in a lease situation. And so we were intrigued. And yeah, from the very first time we spoke with the landowner to our first visit out here and all the way till today, it has been an extremely positive relationship with him. He is interested in us being here for the long term and seeing our investments through. So right now we're in a 6-year lease to start the farm, and we would not have been able to access land of this size or quality or the infrastructure available here in a straight out purchase kind of position. And it's written into the language of the current lease that if the relationship continues to go well, that it's the mutual intention of owner and us that we would then go into a 99-year lease. And so that's really where we felt like this was that opportunity knocking at our door, where there was potential down the road for that same tenure and security that we were seeking through ownership, but just kind of finding a unique and different route to get there. So yeah, that's the land situation we're in right now.
Very cool. So how many acres is the property?
Yeah, the whole property is about 44 acres.
Oh, wow.
20 of it is flat pasture land. About 20 of it is a mix of open, cleared upland pastures, and then about 15 acres of woodland around the property. And yeah, that's the total size of the farm.
So it's a nice mix. Yeah. And then talk about your water situation.
Yeah, so in addition to the space available, the infrastructure, we were very fortunate. The previous owner had a very good well installed several decades ago. So that's situated on the top of the hill, kind of tucked back, and it's high enough pressure that we're able to, between all of our enterprises, we have vegetables and different livestock. We're able to maintain really good water pressure with fairly high usage off of that well.
Gotcha. And Western North Carolina is well known for its water. There's plenty of water in that area. So yeah, the wells are typically well producing, which is good. So yeah. All right. Awesome. So share a little bit about kind of like what were your first steps when you came onto the land?
Yeah, I mean, zooming back before there was any actual land to be doing anything on, like I was saying, we spent a lot of time building up a business plan that we could apply once we found the opportunity and deciding which enterprises we were interested in starting with. So we knew that we wanted to be a mixed farm, so have multiple enterprises running. And what made the most sense to us to get started was uh, quick turnaround, cash flowing enterprises. And the ones that checked the boxes for us primarily were annual vegetables and pastured broilers to get started. We really didn't want to go into large amounts of debt to get things off the ground. And those are enterprises that I like to share about and educate on some of the benefits there of being able to reinvest profits very quickly. So yeah, we had an idea. We also knew that we wanted to implement some sort of agroforestry system. And so once we decided we were coming here to Wild East and we actually had land to work with and an aerial map to start laying out the design, we had about a 3 month period between learning we were coming here and actually moving in. So there was several months of diligent planning and design work on the back end to really turn those theoretical business plans into a real business plan, to lay out the design of the agroforestry systems, to plan out locations of things like the gardens and the chicken processing shed and all the bootstrapped infrastructure we would need to get off the ground, so that it put us in a really good position that once we actually moved onto the land, we could pretty much immediately hit the ground running on the actual physical elements
Correct.
of,
Yeah.
of starting the farm. So yeah, that first several months, we were building some of the first no-till gardens. We were laying the groundwork to plant 12 acres of mixed agroforestry tree crops. We were planning out the broiler enterprise, and once spring rolled around, we were just pretty quickly into production in our first year.
Okay. So talk a little bit about, you have the three big enterprises, or your agroforestry, the broilers, vegetables. Talk a little bit about, obviously agroforestry is the longest term. So that was the most, and I would say that's probably the most infrastructure and not infrastructure per se, but capital intensive, correct? As you started that?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kinds of trees were you focused on with that?
Yeah, so the farm was kind of neatly subdivided already into different areas. So we wanted to do kind of a mix of different types of plantings in some of the different pastures. So our main tree planting is a mixed planting of fruit and nut trees. We focused on tree crops that, for the fruits that we knew from experience in visiting other farms that do very well in the South. We're not trying to fight an uphill battle to make certain types of trees do well here that just really don't.
Yep. Okay.
So what that looked like was some certain varieties of southern adapted apples, Asian pears, Asian persimmons, pawpaws, and mulberries. So there's kind of a mix of more familiar, commercially available tree crops, as well as some more tree crops that are familiar to foragers or people who are really in touch with the local ecology here. And it's all planted out on a mixed pattern. So in terms of looking at a commercial orchard where it's set up for very optimal mechanical harvest and efficiency, we steered the design to be more geared towards U-pick. And by having that uh, mixed pattern where the trees are planted amongst one another instead of a row of apple here, a row of pear there, we're trying to give a U-pick opportunity in the future to folks coming out to the farm that mimics foraging more than traditional U-pick opportunities and brings people out throughout the whole growing season. So we have a different planting of blueberries, about an acre of blueberries that folks can come out early in the season. Later on, when the persimmons are coming on, they'll come back in late summer, and then as it rolls into fall, the pawpaws and apples and pears will be coming in. And yeah, just kind of trying to design it for that purpose, to have you pickers out here and experience this place, as well as providing ourselves with food security, with foods that we know that we like and that we want to put up and store and enjoy. So that's Northfield. I mentioned our blueberry planting, and then we have about a 3 acre somewhat experimental nut orchard. That's a mix of this cat, um, a mix of more commercially familiar nut species like pecan, a mix of walnuts that are both some native varieties as well as some cultivars. We have chestnuts planted, hazelnuts, um, and even more so than the fruit trees. That's a longer term in general, since those can take over a
Correct.
decade or longer to really start producing. So that is in the future could be integrated with animals by offering them mast as feed intake, as well as longer term food security for us as well.
Okay. And then on the blueberries, talk a little bit about your blueberry production. Is that all mulched with wood chips, or is that on fabric, or talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, yeah. So that was so zooming out a little bit. That whole first year, it was just my wife and I, and so we were finding creative ways to get things done efficiently. Where when we could have volunteers come out for the plantings, we were kind of ready to hit the ground running. So it's on this west-facing slope, and we went ahead and we pre-dug all the holes before the plants even arrived, so that we could plug them in. They were planted into nice big holes and then mulched with a layer of cardboard and wood chips, which we reapply annually.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and in that first year, 2023, seemed like really good survival, really good establishment. And then this year, as they've really established their roots, it's been promising to see how much growth they've been putting on. They're planted 6 feet between berries, and then 10 feet between rows. And
Okay.
so that's adequate to uh, either graze some of our sheep through the lanes to help keep the grass down. If it gets ahead of us, it's wide enough to bush hog as well. And yeah, but besides that, and going through a couple times a year and weed whacking between the plants as they are establishing, it's been sufficient to keep the grass and weed competition down.
Okay. All right, let's move over to the broilers now. So, talk a little bit about how that it appears, looking at your pictures, that goes right through the nut orchards and the other orchards and the alleyways.
That's right. Yeah. So part of the design was having standardized widths in between the rows of trees that we planted out, so that we could have a predictable and efficient way to move animals in between, as the grass is still really flourishing in that pasture in between the tree lanes. So yeah, we kind of zigzag them in this dance through the pastures, and we use portable electric netting as protection outside of their pens. And the pens are an adapted Salatin style broiler pen that a lot of folks are familiar with. So rather than having those sitting on the ground and utilizing a dolly to move those daily, we vaulted them up onto bike wheels, which has several different really great benefits that we've been enjoying this year. Because we did start with the traditional Salatin pen.
Yeah.
Number one is that because we vaulted them and the roof is sloped, each one covers more space in terms of offering shade and weather protection. So
Okay.
you can fit comfortably over 3 times as many broilers per pen as you can putting them in the fully enclosed Salatin pen. So we need less
Okay.
infrastructure per quantity of broilers. Um, it's also really nice because we were able to upgrade to 2-inch dimensional lumber instead of the 1 inch. With the
Okay.
Salatin pens on the ground, a 2-inch dimensional lumber would create something that's way too heavy to drag even with a dolly. But because they're up on bike wheels, the mobility of the structures, even though they're heavy duty, is very easy. I like to say that a small child could easily move them.
Okay.
And the heavier dimensional lumbers for long term, keeping the structures around for longer term. They're sturdier, as well as protecting against heavy windstorms, which we can get particularly in the spring. So they're heavy enough they're not going to blow away, but light enough to easily move them. And yeah, that we have it all set up with automatic waterers on float valves that stay full all day. And yeah, it's a really easeful process of just setting up the next paddock, opening up the gate, pouring the feed out, and then moving the tractors, and they kind of move along as you're moving the shade to the next paddock. Um, so yeah, yesterday, two of us moved 1,500 broilers, all the chores involved with that in about 20 minutes. Or sorry, not 1,500, just over 1,000 broilers in about 20 minutes. So, yeah, we've been
Okay.
dialing it in and tweaking things to try to make the daily chores as easeful and quick as possible.
Nice, nice. Talk a little bit about. So you've got the three main enterprises. I'm assuming at this point the orchards aren't doing a lot of revenue, but I'm assuming the revenue is all focused on the broilers and the vegetables.
That's correct. Yeah. So the tree plantings won't really start coming online for at least a couple more years. We bought them in as bare root plants, and they've been putting on a lot of growth, but still in that establishment phase. So yeah, the market gardens and the broilers comprise together about 90% of the farm's total revenue right now. We have a couple
Okay.
of like sideline or seasonal enterprises too that fit really well with utilizing the amount of space that we have on the farm as well as offering a diverse product line. So we run a batch of holiday turkeys that are currently out on pasture. We get them in at the end of July and process right before Thanksgiving. And then we have some strips of woodlands that we're in the process of converting into more of a silvopasture, just in the other direction. So instead of planting trees into pasture, we're working towards getting the conditions right to establish grasses in the existing woodland. So we run several batches of feeder pigs through those woods as
Okay.
well. So yeah, between those two, those are smaller, less focused enterprises, but again, bringing a diverse product that we can offer to customers and bring to market, and are also serving an ecological benefit that has some end goals to it.
Okay. So talk a little bit about the team that you have on the farm to keep this all running.
Yeah, so I mentioned last year it was just Lyric and I running all the back end, all the day to day. This year we have four of us total, so it's Lyric and I, and then a crew of two extra folks, Zach and Liv. And yeah, the four of us have been able to keep up with operations really well, and that's been promising as we're figuring out what it looks like to scale and grow. Typically, like the workflow of ordinary days is we start by doing animal chores, kind of knock that out of the way first. We all go out and kind of hit different parts and get it done quickly. And then tap into kind of group garden tasks, whether that's flipping beds, harvesting, planting, trying to get that stuff done in the morning hours with many hands. And then there's always kind of individual projects that we can send each other off on in the afternoons. And that's been a really effective and pleasant workflow.
Very nice. Talk a bit about your market. So where does all your produce and chicken at this point go?
Yeah, so we are at a weekday farmers market in Asheville on Wednesday afternoons. It's a really great weekday market here, and we bring chicken, pork, vegetables there every week, and so that comprises relatively small amount, but we're happy with the revenue from that market of the total economic picture. We um, have several wholesale customers as well for both the produce and the chicken. And I don't know if I would have thought of pursuing wholesale unless that farm I had managed before was pretty much entirely wholesale. And I got to see the benefits of the reduced labor and kind of the ease of planning of doing wholesale, especially for a vegetable operation. You're trading off slightly lower revenue for in my mind, a much more efficient process to get your food sold. So yeah, we've got a customer in Asheville called Mother Earth Foods that buys a significant amount of our produce, and they buy that all in bulk quantities. We have a partner called Equal Plates Project that has a standing order of whole chickens every single week, And they're a really cool organization because they're a nonprofit that they have a kitchen and chefs that take in all this local food and turn it into prepared frozen meals for folks, and they give that out at no cost to folks experiencing food insecurity. Um, and then, yeah, some other ones. There's one here close by in the town. We live near Marion called the Foothills Food Hub. Um, Also a nonprofit working in food access. And so we've really gotten fortunate that in the time that we've started the farm, there's been this expansion of state and federal programs giving funding to both for-profit and nonprofit organizations to have money to purchase food from farmers and get them, the payment that they need to make a go at it, but distributing it to the end consumer at no cost. So all told, between the wholesale and farmers market, about 40% of all the food that leaves the farm gets to the end consumer at no cost to them, which is something that we're really grateful for and proud of.
That's awesome that you've got such a wide range of places buying your produce, as well as some that are like, it's standing orders, because standing orders are always great. If you can produce something that you know is going to be taken and used, that's so key for a farm startup. So that's really great that you're able to work with those organizations and get that all working. What would you say your favorite marketing channel is?
Yeah, on a personal level, I really enjoy the farmers market, and I think part of the reason for that is because we're right now only doing one a week, so it's not this major workload on the harvest end or on the getting
Okay.
to market and hustling. And it's a nice opportunity as we kind of rotate through who goes for us to get off the farm and interact with the community. So yeah, I think all of us on a personal level, we really enjoy the market for those reasons. I think on the business level, the wholesale and really working with the food access organizations feels really good and value aligned for us, and that we're getting paid adequately to cover our costs and then some, and that just knowing that food isn't being excluded to a community of folks who can afford it, but also folks who, like I said, are experiencing food insecurity as well. So, um, yeah, we're really happy about that for those reasons.
Awesome. Talk a little bit about the business side of managing the back end. Is that something that you focus more on, or someone else on the team? Kind of who spearheads that?
Yeah, so we've got a nice dynamic right now, where we share the load, particularly between Zach, Lyric, and I. So Zach's in a garden manager position, so
Okay.
he has some more responsibilities related to the garden, as well as helping with all the day-to-day around the farm. But yeah, he's been in charge as he's come on of taking on all the crop planning, and numbers and record keeping on the gardens for harvest logs and all of that. So that's a pretty considerable amount of back end record keeping if you want to do a good job with it and really know what you're looking at. So he manages all that on the back end. Lyric really manages the marketing and public relations and communication end of things. So she's the main person liaising with the customers. She's really proficient at all of our newsletters and social media, and yeah, has spearheaded that and done a really good job with it. And then on the back end, I end up, I really enjoy it. So I end up doing a lot of the bigger picture, kind of like future enterprise planning. What kind of numbers do we need to do next year? What kind of scale do the enterprises need to be at? As well as generally having a similar purview to Zach as he does in the vegetables with the animals. So I keep track of all of the back end stuff on the livestock enterprises, and thus far, Lyric and I have kind of tag teamed the bookkeeping for the farm. So yeah, we all kind of share the load and spend obviously some time doing that, but none of us feel overburdened with the volume, because we've been able to share it.
Okay, so it's nice that you guys got your kind of little areas that each focuses on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the vegetables. I believe you guys do that as like low or no till. So kind of share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we we do a no-till market garden setup. So it's right now it's just about between 3/4 and 1 acre. So it's a pretty small footprint. We're focused on uh, biointensive cropping, so relatively close spacing compared to some tractor style operations. Quick bed turnaround, quick yielding crops, and pick and come again crops as well. So yeah, we decided to go with a deep compost system for the establishment of the gardens. So when we first got here, everywhere that we have the market gardens in now was pretty compacted horse pasture. And depending on the time scale of establishment, we did various iterations of an initial tillage to just kind of knock back the existing grasses and perennial weeds. In some of the areas that we've built more recently, we were able to get multiple rounds of cover cropping in before actually laying down the compost. And then, yeah, for establishment, we have a pretty effective system for laying the compost into the beds in a very standardized fashion. We built this little wooden frame that's the depth and width of the beds, and it's in a multiple of our bed lengths. So come in with the tractor bucket, dump a load of compost, rake it flat, move it on to the next chunk, and we can get a bed built pretty quickly that way without having to hand cart or wheelbarrow all that weight around.
Okay.
And yeah, we're able to go straight from that ground prep stage to putting the compost down to planting into that very quickly. So that was the establishment, a thick 6 inch layers, a 6 inch layer of compost at establishment. From there, it's top dressing just to kind of maintain the compost both as the current growing medium for the vegetables as well as an effective weed suppressant. And yeah, that's just a little bit about the establishment, at least, of the gardens and the footprint.
Okay, so this tool you've talked about again, I'm trying to get it. Are you driving down the field and it's as wide as the bucket, so then you just kind of focus, or you go at the sideways onto the bed?
Right, that's a good question. Yeah, so the wooden frame I described is a completely separate, just very simple, scrap together polygon that's light enough to move by hand. So that
Okay.
goes onto where we're gonna put the compost, and then yeah, the tractor comes in with the bucket from the side, dumps
Ah,
it
okay.
in, and then we rake it flat.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes more sense. Cool technique, though. I bet you could also rig one up that could come in from the end of the field too. It'd just be more raking. Anyway, I'm just trying to. I like that aspect because that is one of the biggest challenges I see with a lot of farmers is that initial bed prep and getting the compost in properly, unless you have one of those mini compost spreaders.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The compost you have is that a locally produced? Are you making it yourself?
Yeah, so there's an organization called Atlas Organics that has several different facilities across the southeast. So they've got one in Durham about 3 hours from us, and then one in Greenville about an hour and a half from us. And so it's I guess regionally produced, fairly high quality organic compost that we're buying in, and they're able to deliver at a really good price and in large bulk quantities as well, which is crucial for us. So they'll come with up to 60 yards at a time if we need that much.
Very nice. And that's awesome. Yeah, because like around here we have okay compost, but it's pretty woody. So we just have to buy it in, and then we let it sit for a number of months while we treat it with some different probiotics and prebiotics, and so that
Right.
helps it break down further before we actually spread it. So
Yeah, and
awesome.
we've had to do that too. We've had a couple loads that have come in mulchier than others, and kind of set those aside and let those kind of finish cooking for a little while.
Gotcha. Okay. Talk a little bit about the aspect of like your advice to new farmers. So obviously you're still in that startup phase, as I would say. What advice would you give to someone else who's just getting going?
Yeah. Well, for folks who haven't kind of still have the dream but haven't started their own enterprise yet, speaking from my experience, it was extremely valuable to have the opportunity to manage a commercial operation before starting out on our own. Um, that helped me so much to understand the pace and the volume of a certain scale, which, it really flattened out the learning curve for me on just what that requires, both in terms of effort as well as infrastructure and tools and materials to make that work efficiently. Um, also was fortunate to have that owner of that farm be a very good mentor in terms of his approach and mentality to farming, where he didn't take challenges too hard, and if something went wrong, he kept a really cool head. And I think if I had gotten into it, at least as my disposition, without having observed him for 3 seasons, would have had more challenges on the emotional side when things don't go exactly to plan. But yeah, I think, whether that's in that situation or otherwise, seeking some kind of farm mentor, whether they live locally or someone that you can hop on the phone with and visit occasionally, and just build that relationship with someone who you can bounce questions and ideas off of, because they've already kind of gone through what you're about to go through or are currently going through. And that's been really helpful too, both with that farm owner as well as other farmers I've connected with over the years. Um, I think that general advice for folks getting started or who have already started, that's mostly based on observation, is trying to find a point where you're able to comfortably balance the idealism and long-term goals of the vision that you have for the piece of land or the farm business, with the pragmatic approach of what is this going to take to A, make enough money to keep it sustainable, B, work efficiently enough and not be so overloaded with projects so that you're not always operating with the sensation that burnout is always right around the corner. And, in that vein, on our farm, in our experience, we're long-term geared towards some of our more idealistic visions of focusing on perennial production, but finding the right enterprises that fit our context right now, that are, building a name for our business in the community, establishing that we provide really high quality food consistently, um, and getting started on the long term vision by doing a lot of things in the day to day now that don't necessarily fit the long term idealism. And just keeping that vision steady and not biting off more than you can, which doesn't always look like workload, but can also look like disappointment when you have this kind of ideal dream and things need to operate in a little more of a business and enterprise sense. So that's something just I see a lot of struggle from young farmers with, that idealism not quite being matched with the pragmatism. And I understand it fully, because it's so many of us get into it for a lot of beautiful and values driven reasons. And it's not to say you need to compromise your values, but it's just to say, where can you find that balance point where you're striving for something long term that fits that context, while being pragmatic in the short term, so that the economy and the human element are functioning along the way.
Absolutely. Well, Noah, that was great. And thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. We appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great chatting with you.
So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.